Mr. President, yesterday I had the chance to once again tour the devastated area in my state of Texas caused by Hurricane Ike, this time with the President of the United States and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Secretary Mike Leavitt, along with David Paulison, the Administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It had been 2 days before that, on Sunday, which I had done the same thing in southeast Texas in the Beaumont area, talking to the mayors and county judges in that afflicted part of the state, as well as having been to Galveston, which those two places, particularly Orange County and Galveston County on the southeast part of our state, which took the brunt of Hurricane Ike. And I want to say that there are a lot of people who are hurting now in Texas. We have roughly 2 million people without power. Many people have left their homes under evacuation orders and don't know what the condition of their home is, and certainly are dying to get back so they can sort of assess where they are, whether they've been wiped out or whether there's something they'll be able to rebuild and recover from. At the same time, we know there are people who are in evacuation shelters set up by the Red Cross with FEMA's help and others, and where they are getting the necessities of life: food, water, and shelter. But these are the people, very same people, who are eager to get back home to see whether their house is still standing, whether they can rebuild, as I say, or whether they're going to have to start from scratch. I just want to say that the emergency response by the state of Texas, primarily the governor and his team, as well as the leaders at the local level, the county judges and the mayors, was really about as good as I can imagine it could have been. Unfortunately, because of Hurricane Gustav, when it did not turn out to be as severe as many thought, and millions literally evacuated, I don't think many people felt like Ike was going to be as bad as it turned out to be, and so many people hunkered down in place and did not take the advice of the local and state leadership to evacuate. Unfortunately, now they find themselves, roughly 2 million people, without power. Yesterday, Mayor Thomas and Galveston pointed out that not only have the toilets not flushed since last Friday in Galveston, that not only presents a inconvenience and a hardship, but it's also a public health hazard. And we have many people who yesterday they decided, well, let's give people a chance to look and leave. In other words, if they were worried about their homes, give them a chance to come back on Galveston Island, check it out, and then leave, because the air conditioning, the refrigeration, the basic services provided by power were not available. Unfortunately, I think if you saw, like I did, the entry and exit into Galveston Island was jammed with people wanting to come back under that look and leave policy. But the mayor decided, and I think wisely so, to suspend that because of the logjam. But I do want to say that in the worst of disasters, usually you find the greatest examples of the human spirit, and of neighbors helping neighbors, faith-based organizations for no other cause than serving their very basic mission, are out there making sure people are fed, making sure they're sheltered, and doing everything they can to try to help people rebuild their lives. We were fortunate in one sense that the storm was not as bad as originally predicted. At one point, there was an estimate that 125,000 would be lost, that the surge would reach up to 25 feet. That is, the water that's being pushed ahead of the storm would actually come all the way up the Houston Ship Channel and cause massive flooding and destruction and possibly loss of human life. And while too many people did, in fact, lose their lives, fortunately, it was not as bad as it could have been. Texans remember, and history reminds us, that it was just 1900 when Galveston was hit by another hurricane, where anywhere between 6,000 to 8,000 people died. Fortunately, the numbers were in the single digits in Texas, and because of not only the preparation, because of modern building codes, which created stronger houses for those people who did decide to hunker down, and also the search and rescue operation conducted by the state and federal authorities working together to try to get people out who had been trapped literally without electricity and without power, without gasoline. We were able to get many people out and to safety in these shelters. But it's important, I think, for the people of this country to know that no matter who you are or where you live, that we do have the systems in place, both at the local and state, but also at the federal level, to be of assistance to you if you need help. And now, of course, as I mentioned, many people are trapped really where they are. Maybe they went to a hotel, maybe they went to a friend's or relative's house. But with the President yesterday, he announced that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Federal Emergency Response Agency, had authorized people to basically stay in the hotel or motel, if that's where they're located, for up to 30 days while the power gets restored and while cleanup and maybe down power lines are removed. So that ought to give people some relief that they're not going to have to look to money they don't have just to be able to pay the bill to stay in place if they're in a hotel or motel for the next 30 days if they come from the affected counties. Now, because of the major disaster declaration that occurred, both public assistance in terms of helping to rebuild the affected areas in the state, but also personal assistance is available through FEMA. The first step, as we tried to announce to the public yesterday, but which, because of, obviously people don't have internet access when their power's down, they don't have televisions to watch the announcements, or maybe even radios to be able to know what to do. But it's important for the public to know, and I think not just in the affected regions, that they need to register with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, for personal assistance, and that's the first step to getting back to your house, making sure that any damages are appropriately assessed, and making sure that the affected people get the help that they're entitled to under the law. And I would just add, in addition to the Federal Emergency Management Agency website and their 1-800 number, that if my constituents will call any one of my offices, either here in Washington, D.C., which we kept open 24/7 during the storm, but also any of my regional offices in Tyler, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Harlingen, Lubbock, or Austin, that we will get them the help that they need and that they are entitled to. My hope is, Mr. President, is I've heard some rumors from the other side of the House that Speaker Pelosi was talking about moving a stimulus package, a huge additional spending package of roughly $50 billion, that there were going to be some provisions in there for disaster recovery, for wildfires and other things. And I would welcome that, but with this caution, that we not allow politics and the event and the opportunity to use this as sort of a Christmas tree for a bunch of bloated spending that's not necessary to restore people to their homes and to repair the damaged infrastructure, but this not be used as an occasion for politics. To me, the most cynical thing that could possibly happen in Congress is that we look past the people that are in immediate need, and we look for political opportunities to perhaps spend the taxpayers' money on programs that would not otherwise pass because they are somehow bundled up emergency spending for storm relief. There's one other thing I learned in this disaster that I think is very important as we look at dealing with our energy crisis generally, with the high price of gasoline and the high price of oil, which perhaps is the #1 economic concern of the American people today. The Gulf Coast is indeed a laboratory of energy that supplies the daily needs of our country. And when a big hurricane comes in like this one did, of the 25 refineries, these are the places that actually make gasoline out of oil, representing more than more than a quarter of the nation's refining capacity, 17 of the 25 had to be taken offline because of the storm. In addition, 9 different oil pipelines, these are the major oil pipelines that transmit oil from the Gulf to various parts of the country, they also had to be shut down because of Hurricane Ike. And these are going to have an impact on America's oil and gas supply. Hopefully, the preliminary indications are going to prove to be true and that there were no major environmental spills or problems associated with this. But to me, it was just another reminder of how much Congress needs to remember that we cannot put all of the nation's energy, or at least 25% of it, in one place, and it's literally like putting all of your eggs in one basket. As the saying goes, if you put all your eggs in one basket, you better sure take care of that basket. And the fact of the matter is, I think as we look forward to hopefully removing the moratorium on outer continental shelf drilling and exploration and production of oil and building of refineries here at home, so we have to depend less on imported energy from the Middle East, that we will remember the lessons of Hurricane Ike and Hurricane Gustav, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita, because, frankly, putting so much of our nation's energy capacity in an area that is from time to time going to be affected by these natural disasters is, I think, something we ought to take note of and do something about. And by producing the ability, or at least allowing the ability for more development, exploration development, building of pipelines, building of refineries in other parts of the country, and producing more here at home, we will, as we use less by conservation measures, we can produce more American energy so that we are less reliant on imported oil from the Middle East. I would just say that, there have been a lot of interesting proposals being made, but I want to caution my colleagues against some of the proposals that claim to do more about drilling, but which in fact create further obstacles to further American oil exploration and drilling. Matter of fact, one of the initial proposals we saw, and I know this was in good faith, I'm not questioning the good faith of the proponents, but the effect of it would actually be to raise taxes and diminish domestic oil production and actually limit energy exploration. Now, it's true, we would go from 85 to roughly 70% of the outer continental shelf that would be available for drilling under this proposal, but what we would in effect be doing is put a 60-vote barrier on going into that other 70% in the future. I don't know why, if we are willing to acknowledge the fact that modern drilling technology will allow for the exploration production of oil in one place, like the outer continental shelf, why we would restrict it in other places on the outer continental shelf, or developing the oil shale out west, or perhaps even in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in a 2,000-acre piece of frozen tundra in the middle of a 19-million-acre wildlife refuge, something that can be developed, I believe, in an environmentally responsible way.